Imagine these two of rock's best guitarists. Today, Page has broken his long silence and revealed a less flattering side of Clapton that few fans expected. What emerges is not just a professional rivalry, but a complex relationship marked by creative differences, philosophical clashes, and personal struggles that shaped both their careers. Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin and Eric Clapton, often referred to as Sloned, were once united by a shared passion for blues, but are now divided by decades of rivalry and personal friction. Although they both had blues music and origins in the early 1960s, Clapton, a rising star at the time, was a member of the Yardbirds, a band Page would later join. Despite this, their approaches to the trade were very different. Pa's eagerness to experiment with heavier riffs and psychedelic influences infuriated Clapton, a purist who admired musicians like Robert Johnson. These differences, which had previously been smoldering beneath the surface, would finally explode into a full-fledged clash of egos when Led Zeppelin burst into the scene in 1968. Page, who had been praised as a blues genius, had already established himself as a creative pioneer. Consider how Clapton, who had been at the forefront with Cream, was suddenly overshadowed by a rival whose work seemed to stretch the limits of what rock could do. Clapton's expansive compositions and booming riffs transformed rock music. This friction was brought to light by Page in his most recent revelations, portraying Clapton as someone who is unwilling to change. For Clapton, creatively adhering to the blues purity was a mark of honor. For Page, it was a constraint. Fans quickly saw the difference between Clapton's more conventional blues work and the publication of Stairway to Heaven, a masterpiece that combined folk rock and classical elements. Comparisons were unavoidable. Although there was a hint of rivalry in their mutual respect, Page believed that Clapton's resistance to change sprang from insecurity. Clapton is renowned for his due to his sensitivity to criticism. Zepp's success was viewed as a challenge to his standing, which fueled their quiet but noticeable rivalry. Beyond his disputes at work, Clapton's personal life was a war zone of its own, rife with addiction, loss, and remorse due to his battles with heroin and alcoholism. In the 1917s, Clapton's addiction was well known, but the toll it took on his relationships and career was astounding. Here, the renowned guitarist slouched over his guitar, battling the dual burdens of substance abuse and fame at his lowest. He was unrecognizable. A shadow of the person who had enthralled audiences all across the world, one of Clapton's most well-known personal tragedies was the death of his young son Connor in a terrible accident on January 1, 1991. The song Tears in Heaven, appears in heaven, which was born out of unspeakable pain and serves as a reminder of the legendary musician's human frailty, became one of his most iconic compositions. Pa remarks regarding Clapton's private life were evaluated. But disclosing that his addictions frequently affected his judgment in both his musical and personal life, Clapton's relationships, such as his tumultuous marriage to Pattie Boyd, who was previously married to George Harrison, were characterized by emotional turmoil and infidelity. These difficulties, though intensely private, were made public, which further complicated Clapton's story. In addition to being renowned for his innovative music, Eric Clapton's remarkable career is also a story of complicated relationships and creative struggles. Brilliant guitarist among these conflicts, Clapton's relationship with George Harrison stands out as intimate and extremely tense. Picture this: Eric Clapton, the brooding guitar virtuoso, and George Harrison, the spiritual and contemplative Beatle, bound by their love of music and one woman. Clapton's interactions with other rock legends were frequently complicated, tinged with unspoken rivalries, and riddled with personal betrayals. Muse and Pattie Boyd Harrison's dazzling wife unintentionally became the focal point of their tense relationship. Companionship, although Harrison first appeared unconcerned, the truth was more nuanced. Their friendship on stage and in social circles concealed an underlying tension. Clapton's obsession with Boyd was no secret. It was a fiery, unrelenting passion that burned through his art and his life. His unrequited love drove him to write Lila, a raw, aching anthem of desire and despair. Although neither of them publicly acknowledged the strain, Clapton's obvious pursuit of Boyd caused rifts in their relationship, and things got even more complicated when by 1979, Harrison and Boyd's marriage was starting to deteriorate. Although they maintained a public facade of friendship, with Harrison even attending Clapton and Boyd's wedding, the relationship was permanently changed when Boyd and Harrison got divorced and she married Clapton, which cemented their unspoken competition and competition. The dramatic juxtaposition of Clapton's raging emotion and Harrison's quiet dignity permeated their conversations for years, making their partnership a moving reminder. Exploring the intricacies of love, loyalty, and treachery in the close-knit community of rock royalty, Clapton's disagreements over creativity continued. This influence permeated his partnerships, particularly with Cream, and extended beyond his personal ties. From the beginning, the trio, which consisted of drummer Ginger Baker and bassist Jack Bruce, was a volatile mixture of brilliance and chaos. Their fiery personalities were always starting arguments, making the band a ticking time bomb. Trapped in the midst, Clapton found himself an unwilling referee in a never-ending ego conflict, while Ginger Baker, the fiery and unpredictable drummer, brought an explosive energy to the group but was notorious for his confrontational attitude. Jack Bruce, the talented but domineering bassist, had a penchant for pushing the boundaries of creativity with his intricate jazz-infused bass lines that frequently clashed with Clapton's desire for a raw, stripped-down blues sound. Imagine the tension in the studio as Clapton, despite being admired for his artistry, found it difficult to make his voice heard over the din of conflicting opinions and tempers. Clapton subtly attempted to guide the band toward his vision of soulful simplicity, as their rehearsals and recording sessions were as famous for their arguments as for their music. Screaming matches broke out over everything from song arrangements to live performances, with Clapton frequently withdrawing into silence, disillusioned by the chaos by 1968. Baker's insistence on high-energy improvisation contrasted with Bruce's intricate compositions at the beginning. Resentment, cost-weariness, and a lack of creative harmony as Clapton grew more and more disenchanted with the idea of supergroups. He decided he had had enough. The breakup of Cream was a bitter ending for a band that had pushed the limits of rock, but it was also an opportunity for Clapton to leave the toxic atmosphere that had pampered his creativity. Boo. These conflicts with Baker and Harrison Bruce provided a clear picture of Clapton's career, which was characterized by both brilliance and discord, whether he was negotiating the emotional upheaval of a romantic triangle or the artistic struggles of a pioneering group behind the famous riffs. Soaring solos, Clapton was a guy who was always at odds with his peers, his craft, and occasionally himself. His ability to channel these tensions into music, however, turned his problems into anthems that spoke to millions of people. Millions of people. Renowned blues legend and guitar master Eric Clapton fell from grace in a single startling moment at a 1976 show in Birmingham. What started out as a normal performance turned notoriety when Clapton went on a drunken rant, making divisive comments on immigration and race that left audiences speechless. Imagine a crowd enthralled by the essence of Clapton's performance, then frozen in shock as their idle, unrestrained speech that appeared to go against the essence of the blues, a genre that is based on the adversities and tenacity of black musicians. The comments were striking in their directness and vehemence. These were not casual remarks, but rather a lengthy tirade. Clapton's remarks supported many fans who had long appreciated his music, were alienated by his far-right political ideas. For an artist whose career was founded on the traditions of Black American music, the betrayal was severe, and fans departed the venue feeling bewildered, saddened, and furious. Fallout was swift. Media outlets covered the episode with fury, and very immediately after, Clapton's name became associated with scandal. This incident, more than any other, exposed the contradictions in Clapton's public persona. On the one hand, he was the brilliant musician who could make a guitar cry. On the other hand, he was a seriously flawed person who was prone to catastrophic errors in judgment and self-destruction. Clapton subsequently attributed the outburst to his battles with drinking, saying he was insane at the time, but the harm had already been done. As a grassroots reaction to what many saw as a betrayal by one of rock's most powerful characters, the comments sparked the creation of the Rock Against Racism campaign. The irony was unavoidable. Clapton, whose music was deeply rooted on blues traditions for many, this event became a symbol of Clapton's complexity because legends like Robert Johnson and B.B. King had abandoned the very communities that shaped his artistry. His remarks were a stark juxtaposition between his love for the music and his own struggles. A man whose talent on stage was tainted by his incapacity to deal with the problems of his own identity and fame addiction, according to Jimmy Page's own reflections on Clapton, this encounter exemplifies the guitarist's problematic personality. Page noticed while Clapton's brilliance frequently concealed these darker truths, his outburst on January 1, 1976, was a symptom of deeper problems. As an artist struggling with the pressures of his status, he was drowning in addiction and occasionally exposing the raw and unpleasant parts of himself to the world. Despite his desire for redemption, Clapton's efforts to make amends in the years following the stain of 1976 persisted, including admitting the incident and supporting anti-racism. The incident became a permanent asterisk on Clapton's career, a reminder of the volatile mix of genius and human fallibility that defined his legacy. For some, initiatives were met with fed reactions. For others, his willingness to face his mistakes was a step toward healing. However, for others, the words could never be undone. In the years since, the controversy has continued to spark. Was the debate a victim of his own troubles, or did it reveal his actual nature? The truth probably falls somewhere in the middle, reflecting both. Contradictions that, despite all of his musical accomplishments, rendered Clapton both a legend and a seriously flawed person, as Jimmy Page's revelations continue to reverberate throughout the rock world. They provide a glimpse into the complex and frequently troubled life of Eric Clapton for all his conflicts, whether they be with his own demons or his contemporaries. The events of 1976 serve as a stark reminder that even the most revered figures are not immune to the consequences of their words and actions. Clapton's tale demonstrates his tenacity and capacity to face his challenges, although his ability to channel them into his music and become one of rock's most iconic personalities demonstrates the depth of his character. Pop criticism also serves as a reminder that even the greatest legends have shortcomings. The dual nature of fame, where every victory and failure is accentuated for the world to see, is demonstrated by Clapton's journey, which is characterized by both brilliance and flaws.